All right, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome everyone to our presentation today on generational giving. My name is Dusty Krikow. I'm the Director of Mission Advancement for the Sisters of St. Agnes in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. I also serve as a board member for CWR and incoming chair for the Education Committee, and I'll be your facilitator today. As we gather today as fundraisers for our organizations, I want to invite us to pause for just a moment of prayer, using a prayer from the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth, specifically for fundraisers. So I invite you to pause and take a breath. Good and gracious God, we recognize all life is a gift and a blessing. We thank you for your most generous love. Encourage us to be persons of honesty and integrity, worthy of proclaiming the gospel in the sacred ministry of fundraising. Help us to always reverence the sacred space where our donors and our missions meet. Give us openness to listen to the needs of our donors. Give us joyful spirits and an eagerness to engage others. Give us hopeful imagination and creative vision, recognizing generosity in even the smallest gift. Give us strong, steadfast hearts in times of discouragement. Give us trusting hearts, knowing that the fruits of labors will be realized long after we are gone. Give us faithful hearts, deeply committed to your realm. Let us feel your presence so that we know we are never truly alone. Remind us always that what we do for the least of our sisters and brothers, we do for you. We ask this in Jesus' name and in unity of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So just a few operational notes today. We are in webinar format. That means that we don't see a grid of faces like you would in your standard Zoom conversation, but asking questions is still welcome. You can do that throughout the webinar session ongoing. We'll be watching both the chat and the Q&A. Both of those are enabled. And if you don't have a chance to get your question responded to, or it comes to you after the fact, both of our presenters will be available for follow-ups via email, and you'll also be able to review this session again later as it will be recorded and available on the CWR website. Speaking of those panelists who will be available later, our speakers today are from CCS Fundraising. In addition to many other populations, CCS Fundraising has been working closely with Catholic institutions to bridge the spiritual and the material since 1947. Please welcome Doug London, Executive Vice President, and Megan Davison, Senior Vice President. Doug and Megan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Dusty, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. We're grateful for the opportunity to have this hopefully very productive dialogue, and please, to Dusty's earlier point, please do use the chat and ask questions. We want this to be as informative as possible. Different generations have different cultures, values, and ways of engaging with philanthropy. And when considering how to engage donors, it's really important to remember that every philanthropist is unique, every donor is unique, and understanding their passions, motivations, values, and interests really do take time. The future of philanthropy revolves around engaging that next generation, Generation Z and Millennials, and understanding how to attract, retain, and grow young professional pipelines and young donor pipelines will certainly ensure a long-term sustainability for each of the organizations that you support. And today, Megan and I hope to share some actionable insights and resources for you to consider as you look to expand your giving generationally. My name is Doug London. I'm an Executive Vice President with CCS. I have the privilege to, with Megan, lead a team in the central United States based out of Chicago. I've spent my career working in philanthropy. I began my career in healthcare fundraising, have been with CCS nearly a decade, and currently have the opportunity and privilege to lead a good deal of our work inside of our faith-based space. So working with dioceses and local parishes, as well as other faith-based organizations across the CCS team. Megan, would love to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks everyone for being here today. My name is Megan Davison, and like Doug, I've done a good amount of work across all sectors, including the faith-based sector, and that includes religious orders like the Franciscan Sisters in Steubenville, Ohio. And, one trend that we are seeing across all sectors, but especially in the religious sector, is this trend of the number of donors decreasing. And so that just speaks to the importance of, as Doug mentioned, really understanding who our donors are, connecting with what drives them, so we can retain our donors and hopefully inspire new givers as well. And that's what we'll talk about today.
Thanks, Megan. As Dusty mentioned, CCS is a 75-year-old strategic fundraising firm. We were founded in the church. Our organization, our first clients was the Diocese of Brooklyn, and we helped to raise funds for the parishes and the dioceses that support that local community, and that remains at the core of the work that we do. CCS, as I mentioned, 75 years old. We partner with 500 nonprofit organizations across the philanthropic sector every year, and CCS as a company is just over 500 employees, with about 350 or so that serve as full-time consultants partnering with our client partners to conduct work on a day-to-day basis.
And then, on top of what Doug shared about our client work, CCS is also a researcher, an innovator, and an educator in the philanthropic space. And so we are frequently providing resources, tools, guidance, and articles on our website and beyond, just opportunities for nonprofit leaders and professionals to grow in their knowledge of certain topics. And so you can see on the screen here examples of past webinars and tools. And so we just encourage you to visit our website to learn a little bit more. One of my favorite resources is the CCS Philanthropic Landscape, and it's something we've been doing for about 11 years. A lot of folks are familiar with Giving USA, which is a great resource. What is outstanding about CCS's Philanthropic Landscape is that it compiles Giving USA data as well as other research points from across the sector to really give a comprehensive view of what is happening in philanthropy today. Questions about how much is given to charity, what motivates people to give to nonprofits, what's happening with each sector. And in particular, in the past 2 years, we've been spending a lot of time looking into trends in DEI, in fundraising and philanthropy. And so you can see in the chat, there's some links to these resources, and we encourage you to take a look.
As I mentioned, our foundation is in working with religious organizations, and as working with dioceses, parishes, Catholic schools, and other faith-based organizations. We also have the opportunity to partner with professional development and networking associations, and a smattering of those are listed here on this page. We hope to today kick off our session by exploring and reviewing the trends in giving across the United States using that Giving USA data that Megan mentioned, and also as it relates to the great wealth transfer, sharing some key trends across generations. We'll then dig deep into looking at Gen Z and Millennial giving trends, understanding what makes them unique, and elevate some actionable steps as you begin to strategically engage on this new topic. And then, as I mentioned, please do use the question and answer function. Megan and I hope to not just hear ourselves talk for the next 40 minutes or so. As I mentioned, Giving USA is a piece of collateral that comes out once a year that aggregates and analyzes giving from the previous year. In 2021, Giving USA reported that charitable giving in the United States reached $484 billion. On average, that means that US individuals, corporations, and foundations donated just over $1.3 billion per day. And while this number is still a record high, it's not a huge increase from 2020, which charitable giving was at $471 billion. The economic, social, and political events from 2020 have continued to have an impact on giving in 2021. And those include things like COVID-19, racial justice and other social justice movements, and also inflation, one of the highest inflation rates in the past 4 years. And despite these challenges in 2021, there was growth in the S&P 500 and GDP, which did create moderate growth for personal disposable income, which is reflected in philanthropy. Giving in 6 out of 10 sectors grew in 2021, including religion, foundations, public society benefit, health, arts, cultures, and humanities, and environmental and animal organizations. Overall, donors returned to their pre-pandemic priorities, with giving to public society benefits and arts and culture and humanities organizations experiencing the most notable growth after a difficult 2020. For those arts and culture organizations specifically, people were in the seats again, which allowed for a larger emphasis on giving. And also, likewise, giving to religion resumed moderate growth after a slight decline in 2020, also similarly likely because many of those mass and in-person gatherings went virtual. After reaching a record high in 2020, giving to international affairs, human service, and education experienced a small growth or a decline in 2021, whereas giving to environmental and animal organizations, public society benefit organizations, and foundations have seen growth for 2 consecutive years. And as environment is that smallest category of giving, it has shown the most impressive growth over a period of 2 years. At 67%, individuals contribute the majority of giving in the United States, totaling just over $326 billion, reaching its second highest level of giving on record when adjusting for inflation. Individuals contributed almost 7 out of every $10 donated to charity in 2021. Mega gifts contributed by individuals totaled $15 billion in 2021, which represented about 5% of all giving. And when accounting for the gifts that individuals made through family foundations and bequests, this amount totals nearly 85% of charitable giving. And so as we think about where it's most important to invest time and resources in fundraising, 85% of dollars come from or are directed by an individual or an individual family.
Thanks. And as you can see here, one major trend in giving is that a lot of dollars have really increased going towards racial justice effort. And so what you can see in this chart here is that the amount of giving to racial justice has increased 4 times from the past decade. So from 2020 to 2022, the amount of giving in just those 2 years, outpaces by 4 times the amount of giving to racial justice over the previous decade. And so that's extraordinary. And looking at this graph, it looks like a large amount of money. But if we think back to Doug's, first introductory comments about, over 400 billion being given in the nonprofit space, this remains a smaller part of that pie. And, although we see it growing, certainly understand the need here outpaces what is being given. And then, in terms of donor advised funds, what we're seeing is that, they are increasing for a number of reasons. There's certainly a convenient way to give. There's some anonymity involved with donor advised funds. And so we've seen a surge in donor advised funds over the past few years. The number of DAF accounts has surged to over $1 million in 2021. Which is about a 27% increase from 2019. And the amount distributed from those donor advised funds is over 30 billion. And so we also have seen the kind of payout rate increase over the past few years. It's always around 20%, and we're seeing it tick upwards. And this is really related to the pandemic. There was a big push by both philanthropists and nonprofits alike to ensure that more dollars were getting to nonprofits and not just sitting in those donor advised funds. And then a final trend to note on the philanthropic landscape is that online giving continues to take up a growing share of charitable gifts. You can see, of course, there was a spike in 2020, and that, of course, is related to, the pandemic when we were not able to be out and about and people were in their homes. And we've seen it, decrease just a bit this year, perhaps as we're returning to normalcy. But, my hunch would be that it continues to stay elevated from 2019 levels just because we built the muscle of giving online. And that's particularly true for younger donors. One trend that we're seeing within this broader trend is that, we used to see a lot of giving from desktop computers, but in the last year, we've seen more giving from mobile devices rather than desktop computers. And so points to the importance of having easy, accessible ways to give via mobile devices. Text to give or QR codes in particular make it easy for folks to give in the moment when they're feeling inspired. All right. And so now we're going to, talk a little bit more about the great wealth transfer and how that is impacting, different generations differently. And, of course, we know baby boomers, which is the generation of people born between 1944 and 1964, are expected to transfer about $70 trillion to younger generations over the next few years. And you've probably heard of this. Many folks are calling this the great wealth transfer. And really, there's three places this wealth can go: taxes, children, or charities. And so it's an important trend to know about. And what does it mean for you? First, I think it means exploring planned giving with your older donors, and making sure that you are capable of receiving planned gifts and speaking about planned gifts with your donors. For your younger donors who may be receiving some of this wealth, it's important to remember that millennials have distinct motivations versus other generations when it comes to their own charitable giving. And so it's important to understand the younger generation's motivations. And in particular, what we're seeing is that they're driven by social issues. The slide where we referenced giving to racial and social justice is in large part driven by younger donors. And if you're wondering, where do we find some of these younger donors, we do know that the likelihood of a new donor giving is strongly related to their parents' giving. And so as we consider finding new donors, it's helpful to look within the families of your existing donors. Digging.
Hey, Megan would love to just interrupt for a second. We had a question regarding online giving. Our online giving is minimal and it doesn't feel worth our effort to draw traffic there. Advice? I might start, Megan, and would love for you to jump in. I think we are seeing, especially as people are reading less and less and becoming more and more attached to their mobile devices, that the ability to give, whether from a mobile device or online, is becoming increasingly larger, as you can see by those statistics on slide 13. Since 2014, the giving from a mobile device has nearly tripled. And so as we think about, where it is that you would invest your time, I think having an ability for people to give online and from their phone, and that quite simply could be a donate button prominently placed on a website, on the top of your website page, so that people can see where they can give, or potentially utilizing a QR code so that people can easily donate from a text perspective. These are small things that are otherwise, a high reward for really a low effort. But as a way to meet, especially, as Megan was mentioning, that next generation of donors, most are giving online and or giving from a donor advised fund. The people that are giving by checks, that generation is decreasing. Would you add anything, Megan?
Yeah, and I think it's fine to set expectations that online giving is always probably going to make up a smaller portion of your overall giving. People tend to give smaller gifts online. And so the key is, like Doug said, to attract those gifts, make it easy for them to give. And then when they do give, learn who they are and engage them. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. And so the payoff of online giving probably comes, a few gifts down the line from that initial gift that they may make on their phone or online. Thanks for that, and keep the questions coming. We'll talk really quickly more about this wealth transfer and just share some trends that we are seeing. People are creating their wills and their estate plans early and earlier than you might think. I think a lot of people, when they think about planned giving, think about, approaching people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and later. And what we know is that oftentimes wills and estates are already established by then. And so it's really important to start having that conversation with your donors earlier. We do know, because of the pandemic, there's been kind of two big shifts in behavior. The transfer time has been accelerated. I referenced that $70 billion to be transferred in the near future. And because the pandemic had some shakeup in our economy, some people stopped, changed their retirement plans or their work plans. And just frankly, because there was, so much kind of death amongst older generations, we're seeing that transfer start sooner than we anticipated. And so it's just good to be aware of that. The amount to transfer to millennials has been reduced, And again, this is related to the economic turmoil that we've experienced in the past few years. Some retirement counts have not performed as well as others. Some people had unexpected job shifts or job losses. And so, what was anticipated to be around $70 million may be a little less than we anticipated. And then, of course, these funds, they are going in part to millennials. They have very distinct giving priorities. And so, again, the importance of knowing, what those priorities are will be important.
Thanks, Megan. So we'd love to now think a little bit about engagement and would like to engage the group here. So ask everyone to prepare to do a poll. And Rosarita, are we ready on our next slide here to do a poll? There we go. I love when the technology works like it's supposed to. Who are your current donors? Would ask everyone to check all options and then press submit. We'll give everyone a second to complete that. All right, Rosarita, how are we doing? All right, so it looks like based on everyone that responded, and thanks everyone for responding, that 92% of folks have matures as their current donors, followed by baby boomers, which is that next generation of 1946 to 1964. And so really matures, boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z really does go in that order. And so as we look on the next slide here, I want to talk a little bit about ways to opportunities to consider how to engage donors across generations, demographics, or backgrounds, and reminding us that everyone is different. Each of these donors have experienced a different major life event. Their values are often a bit different, and the way for which they hope to make an impact and volunteer their time is a bit different. What we can gather on giving trends and perform communications is really it's an opportunity to get to know your donors at a very individual level. While this is a generalization of generations of donors, it's important to really understand, especially for our largest donors and volunteers, understand what their motivations and passions are. Consider why they choose to give to your organization over others, what they value, what motivates them, how they desire to engage. And doing that helps to create a really strong cultivation opportunity for donors. As you see on this slide, we've listed, as I mentioned, 5 generations, what they value, what shaped their life, their percentage of giving, and how they hope to make an impact. With our older generations, our matures and our boomers, they have a higher percentage of giving that is directly related to the time in their life, financial stability they have, and the opportunity to have more dispensable income. If we take a look at the row that describes major life events that shaped a generation's life, these can each be directly related to some of their values. So when it comes to making an impact, all generations do consider volunteering important. But our Gen Z is more related or more interested in focusing on advocacy, being a part of the solution. Given all that's gone on in the world in the past number of years, this isn't surprising that our young people are really interested in wanting to take on a more pivotal role in changing the future for them and for their families. Our mature, we can go to the next slide, Rosarita, that's great. Want to do another opportunity for group conversation. And so we'd like everyone to utilize the chat. But curious, what are your parishes, congregations, places of worship, organizations doing to engage donors across generations? Whether it's in solicitation, in programming, in stewardship, would love to hear what everyone's doing. Dusty, maybe I'll call on you as a guinea pig if we don't get any takers. Sister Beth Murphy, thank you. Telling stories on our web landing page for each campaign, sharing those on social media. That's great. So you're sharing the same story in multiple places, recognizing that some people will utilize the website as a point of contact. Some people will also only just utilize social media. So a consistent brand, but in multiple mediums. That's great. Rochelle says, we do not use social media, but we do use social media, but we do not have an outreach plan for new donors. Thanks for sharing that. We're planning a centennial celebration for a retreat center, and we'll engage old volunteers as well as current volunteers and donors. So again, celebrating milestones, a great opportunity to be able to engage folks together on one common mission and vision. We're starting a small group that is having our older donors bring younger families and friends to the event. So friends bringing friends, this is a great opportunity. People don't say no to people. So if you have someone bring someone, a parent bring a child, a family member bring a younger family member, this is a great opportunity to bring people together. Engaging in stories, volunteering for younger supporters, that's great. Using sisters for text and email, video acknowledgements, that's really great for engaging with alumni. Thank you for sharing that. The videos are really easy. I think a couple of years ago, we all thought that videos needed to be done professionally and we needed to have camera crews do it, but now a great video can just be done on a phone with a selfie. And we're seeing that, especially with, for everyone that is mobile friendly, being able to utilize that device and that opportunity. As we look at some of our trends, our baby boomers are currently the most generous donors in 2021, giving 41% of all donations. And as we saw in the Giving USA results, online giving and mobile giving do continue to increase, whereas millennials and Gen Z are most willing to give through their mobile device. Along the same lines, and speaks to some of the examples we just heard, social media continues to have a strong influence, not only when it comes to raising awareness, but also asking for donations. And we're not going to dig into this today, but things like crowdfunding, peer-to-peer fundraising, Facebook or other giving campaigns, they're all important. Direct mail is not dead. All generations are still saying that asking for money through mail is still an acceptable way to do this. And while the direct mail piece might only serve as a vehicle and the gift could be made online, individuals are still wanting to receive a piece of mail in the USPS to tell them about why it's important to give. And as we think about forms of impact, it won't come into a surprise to most of you, but older generations put a stronger value on their financial contributions as making an impact, as opposed to Gen Z and Millennials who see hands-on volunteering as their greatest area of impact and connection. Megan, let's gen up another poll.
All right, everyone. Does your congregation or organization have plans or ideas already in place to engage the next generation of philanthropists? So we're thinking here about millennials and Gen Z. Give it a few seconds. All right, Rosarita, how does this look in terms of responses? Are we able to see the responses? There we go. Great. So, this is similar to what we see across the board when we ask this, is that, few have formal strategies in place. And, a lot of folks have maybe more informal strategies. They're making it a priority, but maybe nothing written on paper. And then most folks really falling in the know or I don't know camp. And so, just normalizing that if you, do not yet have an engagement plan for younger donors, that you're in good company. But again, we've talked about just the generosity and the wealth that's flowing to these donors. So important to start thinking about what that could look like. And before we dive into some specific tactics for younger donors, want to just start off by reviewing what we see as evergreen strategies that are important for all donors, regardless of their generation. And, I imagine none of these are real surprises here, but of course, consistent, concise communication, making sure that your messaging is authentic, that it matches your mission, and that it allows your audiences to feel connected to you is really important. And one way to do that is, of course, conveying the impact. No one does this better, I think, than food banks, who always have that really clear phrasing of $25 can provide 5 meals. But there's other ways you can convey the impact too. General statistics about the number served or impacted, or sometimes kind of even more impactful than numbers is the stories, the testimonials of those who have been, touched or served or impacted by your mission. And so you can do this type of outreach broadly, generally online through newsletters, but get personalized with your outreach if you can. If you can meet folks in person and bring them to events, of course, that's helpful. But even in your mail or online outreach, to the extent possible, if you can personalize things with their name or something they care about, it will go much further. Of course, we're seeing, and Doug referred to this earlier, the leveraging of technology, virtual campaigns, social media, and of course, video as that really powerful tool. And, I believe, and CCS believes that, all communications, regardless of whether or not they're a fundraising communication, should have a call to action on them, or at least, a donate now button. And so that every communication is giving folks the opportunity to give and hopefully also volunteer or attend an event so that these communications get the most mileage out of them possible. And so at this quote here we love because it really speaks to the way that younger generations think about giving. It's not about money. It's about trying to change the world. And so if we think about, a transactional approach with younger donors, it's not going to fly. There's a real interest in being hands-on and a feeling that they are, not just giving to an organization, but by giving to an organization that they're solving a bigger problem. And so something good to keep in mind as we think about engaging these younger donors. And so let's dive into these Gen Z and Millennials. We often hear this generation or these generations talked about in disparaging ways. And I think that's just the way of the world. The next generation is always perhaps referred to as different than the older generations in certain ways. But, I think what's important to notice is that these generations are wealthy, or not wealthy, they're generous, they're giving, about half of them are giving, and they're giving to causes like children, animal, social service, and health. And important to note for this group, worship. And, one thing we did see in this data as well is within these categories of, children, animal, social service, health, and worship, there is an interest in racial justice, even if it's not broken out separately. How do, these organizations, impact racial justice? It will be an important driver for these generations. And I'm just going to check the chat. Okay, so the question is, with fewer sisters in active ministry, how do we show the impact of a gift other than telling how sisters are being cared for in retirement, to people thinking of their own retirement? Yeah, Doug, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think this is a great opportunity, and we're seeing this in materials all the time, to really giving case studies, having people tell their own stories, using quotes, photos, using the opportunity to share the direct impact of how dollars are directly impacting people as opposed to directing, large groups. So really giving that individual experience of a sister or of someone that's directly impacted by this. Children's hospitals have really led the way in this. Started a number of years ago telling the direct stories of children and how medical teams have impacted them, and we're seeing other sectors now taking this on as well.
Yeah, and I think I might add that because there are fewer sisters in active ministry, that is an impetus to talk about the importance of philanthropy. This is a mission that looks different now than it did 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and we need your support to make sure that we continue to thrive and shine a spotlight on why what we do is important. And so that's what this chart is really about. It's engaging folks in, in your mission and providing them ways to get involved. And maybe we can think about this example of, talking a donor through why there are fewer sisters in active ministry and why philanthropy is meaningful. And so, let's think about this. The first step is, exposing folks to the cause. And so we know people are busy. We have more information coming at us at all directions. And so it's just important to provide multiple points of entry to your organization. And so again, not to just, keep hitting the same points, but it's about social media and different channels of social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. But beyond that, Doug referenced direct mail and, how that is important, email and e-newsletter, print newsletter, make it easy for folks to know more about you. Events are a great way to also include folks in your work. And so if you do have something like a special event, be sure to make sure you're getting as much mileage out of it as possible. Make sure that you are including videos, that you're capturing the names of those who attend so that you can continue having the conversation. And then from there, it's really, you want to help them learn more about your mission, and you want to learn about them. And so those are the next two steps. And so you just, again, through the same channels as you provided entry points, want to find ways to help them, expose them more to your mission. And so this might be an opportunity, going back to that question, to talk about the history and the trajectory of your organization and how, factors have changed to lead to a decline in sisters in active ministry and what that means for your organization. And as you teach them about that, you want to understand their why. What drives them to give? What is the reason that has inspired them to learn more? And I do find, we've talked a lot about social media. These are the types of conversations that are best done personally. That doesn't always mean in person. It can mean screen to screen over Zoom, but this is an opportunity to really get to know someone. And so if possible, spending time with them, having coffee, having lunch, or even a Zoom chat can be helpful. And when they know about you and you know about them, you're able to provide kind of a really customized way for them to get involved. And that, hopefully involves philanthropy, a gift to help them, have an impact on your mission. And so again, if we think about, we have fewer sisters in active ministry, it's really important to support and develop the ones that we have, and to make sure that, this congregation is thriving could be part of that story.
Thanks, Megan. And as we think about engaging the next generation, we wanted to, over the next couple of slides, outline a couple of things to consider when looking at Gen Z and millennials. As we touched on earlier, social media engagement via digital platforms, the use of interactive mediums will catch the attention of Gen Z and millennials and usually increase a reaction. As I noted, taking the time to make sure your communications are mobile friendly, not just your websites, but the materials that you send out, since they can be will likely be viewed on an iPhone or an iPad, and making sure that everything is easily displayed on a cell phone. Also considering establishing a group of young professionals who can help spread the word, whether that's a board or a volunteer group, but key advocates and ambassadors who are leading the way will help bring these folks on board in a faster clip. Gen Z and millennials are also problem solvers, so consider sharing a story and clearly articulate where you need help. What is your call to action? Telling a story can build a connection, but also making it personal can provide really a very customized experience. And also remember to say thank you. Being authentic and showing appreciation for support will continue to engage folks in continued engagement. I learned long ago that it takes 7 times for someone to be thanked for them to feel actually appreciated. And so as we're thinking about how that relates to this next generation, we need to think creatively about how to make that work. As you consider how you might engage young professionals, creativity does really come into play here. There's opportunities to build engagement opportunities through a volunteer program or social media ambassadors. And as you think about your communities, are there an event where you might need night of volunteers or people on planning committees? How can you leverage gatherings, especially as we're coming out of COVID? Young people are interested in doing peer-to-peer activities, whether that's events or fundraising. We also see many organizations asking the young professional boards to take on things like marathons, endurance events, things that are literally action-oriented, where you're moving your feet or your body. Hands-on opportunity are great. Mission trips, working in a food pantry, interacting with young people. But seeing, dedicating a time as it relates to dollars is really important. There's also a great opportunity to understand what the need is in your community. Are there new parents that could be engaged through communities for their children? Are there families that have recently joined that are looking to meet new families in the community? Understanding what these unique opportunities are very important. And lastly, impact. We've said the word impact a lot today, but how are we continually updating the impact of volunteers? Can we once a year say, through your help, X number of volunteers have provided Y hours of volunteer for our organization. And because of your help, we've been able to do this. How are we saying thank you? As I mentioned, 7 times. That's not just 7 thank you letters, but maybe a thank you letter is once, and a phone call is twice, and a little trinket is 3 times. And so thinking about meeting people where they are in different ways of doing that. Many of these ideas can also be translated across generations. So what we're sharing is not just important for the next generation, but the mediums that you're utilizing, the messages that you're sharing, the opportunities that you promote, and the impact that you're focusing on is what's important for this next generation. And before we open it up to conversation and question, we want to just leave you with a couple tips. Get creative, bring them along for the ride, ask for help. Definitely utilize social media, whether that's for a gift or telling stories. Some of those case studies really is important through different mediums of social media. Providing volunteer opportunities, hands-on opportunities for the next generation to get involved. And really view these young professionals and young donors as their own donor community. Help facilitate connections and discussions among peers. Think about how your engagement can be really utilized as a networking opportunity, both personally and professionally.
All right, we shared before that every one of your communications should have a call to action. And so here is our call to action to you. Some questions to help put the thoughts in this presentation into action. First is to, reflect on what the current state is in terms of your organization, your congregation's engagement strategy when it comes to donors. Does it exist? Yes or no? If it does exist, how fulsome is it? And where can you go from there? From there, engage with discussions with your team on what generational giving means for your community. So, if online giving is only 12% of overall giving, what would it mean to have, 12 additional percent on top of your total funds raised? What would it mean to have a handful of younger donors, in your pipeline to become future donors, future major donors, and future leaders? And then, determine what opportunities might exist to incorporate new pathways of engagement in the short or the long term. Does this mean starting a social media channel if you don't have one in place already? Does this mean, as Doug referenced, the importance of volunteerism, creating some sort of volunteerism or engagement program to provide folks those hands-on experiences that young people especially crave? And then finally, revisit these questions and to help you plan for the future. Each of these bullets could serve as a page in your, your next gen engagement plan. And so they can be helpful to just revisit from time to time. Before we close out, want to just offer an opportunity to answer any final questions for the group.
I'll chime in with one since my my Q&A is only functions as a administrator role. I was curious about this conversation from a perspective of generational giving, from the sense of our older donors are retiring. Is there a way that you can suggest that would help us to capture their children's donations as they because clearly their parents have interest in the congregation? How do we take that actual generation giving movement forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're seeing with our multi-generational families opportunities for family gifts. So where parents are saying, I'm giving $10,000 to the church this year, I'd like you to give 2,500. I'm just making up the numbers, right? So as a family, we give $12,500 to the church today, or I'm going to match your giving up to that point. But really utilizing the parents as an opportunity to pass that generational giving on from one generation to the next. Some people don't feel comfortable asking their kids to give, obviously, or potentially giving in honor of their kids, so their kids will give after that point. But really utilizing the parents in the conversation to encourage their kids to know why it's important. Well, unless there's no other questions, which I'm not seeing in the Q&A or the chat, Dusty, Brian, thanks so much for the opportunity to be with you all today. When the deck and all is sent out afterwards, you'll have Megan and my contact information, and anyone on the line, please do feel free to reach out to us and ask questions. We'd be happy to schedule a time to chat with each of you. Otherwise, thanks for the opportunity to be together for the last 50 minutes or so. And on behalf of all of us at CCS, happy and healthy Thanksgiving and a happy holiday season to you. And we look forward to being in touch with you soon.
And we'll reiterate the thanks back to you for such great ideas. I think Sister Beth mentioned in chat just now that this has been helpful overall, and you're getting a lot of little thank yous in there. We really appreciate the time to spend with us today. For the folks on the call, as usual, we will be following up with a survey to get your feedback and to hear how many wonderful ideas you got from this activity this afternoon. And then we'll also have the recording available on the website. As Doug mentioned, please feel free to reach out to both him and Megan with follow-up questions. Their email addresses will be sent your way via the standard Brian email after a webinar. And then the reference documents and sites will also be linked, and a PDF will be attached to that email, or at least linked to the CWR Academy webpage. For those of you who are CWR members, please make a note that upcoming we do have, today's the last day to provide feedback on our upcoming strategic plan. And then we'll be emailing you from Brian. You'll be receiving an email from Brian to vote on the approval of that strategic plan. So we do ask for your continued participation, as verbose as you're being right now, in our voting on the strategic plan, so that we can hit our quorum for approval or disapproval. And thank you so much. I'm going to just post that survey link in the chat, so that if you have not yet talked about given us feedback on the strategic plan, you have the link to that. But otherwise, I hope you all go away today with great ideas. I know I've been chatting with a colleague in the office on a little side chat about all sorts of different ideas I gained today. So it's been a very valuable afternoon. So thank you very much for your time. Have a great day, everyone.